Hey everyone, Katie from Responders for Pride here. And just a heads up, in this episode, we explore personal stories about trauma and its effects. We touch on sensitive topics like suicidal thoughts, unsettling feelings, and traumatic events. Please take good care of yourself while engaging with the content. And if you're having a tough time, remember that help is always within reach. You can text BADGE to 741-741. Contact SafeCall, a 24/7 crisis support line for first responders at 206-459-3020, or visit safecallnow.us for support. Thanks again for listening. We hope you find these brave and vulnerable stories helpful.
This meeting is being recorded.
I just heard that. Was that yours, Nick?
I guess.
This meeting is being recorded. All right, I got to get myself in order here. Welcome to the RfP Podcast, where courage meets community. We are here to uplift the LGBTQIA2S+ community of first responders and their allies with real talk, bold stories, and unapologetic pride. Whether you wear a uniform, love someone who does, or if you just simply care about building a more inclusive world, you are in the right place. So let's spark some change, break stigmas, and have a little fun, maybe, along the way. I am one of your hosts, Katie Bingner, a licensed clinical professional counselor and a Leo spouse.
I'm your host, Nicole McGuire. I am an EMS lieutenant and the president of Responders for Pride. Today, we are excited for the continuation of our Spotlight Series with Christina Ellis. It's going to be from personal struggles to milestones in healing. We're going to cover as much as we can so that you, our listeners, can feel less alone and more supported in the possibilities of healing and recovery. With that, we'd like to warmly welcome back our special guest, Public Safety Officer, Chris Ellis. Hey.
Hi, thanks. It's great to be back.
This is my warm welcomes.
Oh.
Great to see you, Chris. Great to see you, Nick. I'm so glad that we're back here to continue our conversation. Our first conversation, I went back and reviewed it, and oh man, it's such powerful content and information. And I'm so glad that we get to continue that conversation. I'm really excited for getting this information out to our community and to those beyond who will find it helpful. But to just give like a quick recap of what we covered last time. Yes, we covered a lot. One of the biggest things that I think you can take away from the first episode, which we will link below, is this like really thorough list of signs and symptoms, so to speak, of PTSI. We covered a lot around how this can show up and how you can start to maybe notice that this could be more than just daily life stress that's impacting your quality of life, your mental health, your emotional well-being. Some things that maybe our listeners would have never even guessed relate to PTSI, but certainly do. We also talked about what it was like for you guys as you started to notice these things crop up, particularly like the thoughts, the emotions, the physical changes, the behavioral changes, and how deeply confusing some of them can be and feel. Some of them can be very disturbing, like really shake you to your core of who you have always known yourself to be, and yet you're having these internal experiences, and it can really just shake you. Also, we talked about how, especially with regard to those types of signs and symptoms, there becomes an increased urge to hide them.
Yeah.
Right? To just figure out how to deal with them on your own. No need to get anyone else involved here, right? Nothing to see here.
Because it was better inside.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Right. Which really piggybacks off of the conversation we had around compartmentalization and like the conditioning that first responders experience Yes, in part to like help you do your job, right? You need to learn to compartmentalize in order to do this work every day, month after month, year after year, decade after decade for some of you. But that's like spills over not just in like family life, but it spills over in your own capacity to cope with the accumulated trauma. And so it just kind of that reinforces maybe some not so helpful things to the tendency, right, to hide, the tendency to ignore, to minimize, to try and like make things seem normal. And while the reactions that people have to trauma are normal reactions to trauma, they're indications that we need help, right? That we need something to help us heal these wounds. And that's what can really be set back when the approach is to try and hide or ignore or minimize these experiences that are showing up. And so then we talked a little bit about how, especially for first responders, there might be more of a tendency to have the like kind of like the tea kettle um, experience where the temperature rises and it rises and it rises and it's all just in there happening, and eventually there might be like a big release,
Mhm.
whether it be, I know Chris, you had mentioned like this experience of coming home to your cabin with your then partner, and there were like a bunch of people there, and you had just come off of, I think, the like training or cataloging a ton
Yeah.
of evidence,
Yeah.
and you circled the block, and you were like, you called your partner and you were like, please send everyone home. I need to be alone. And you cried, and like there was this big cathartic release, and you assumed at that point that that was enough, that like that was it, that you let it out,
And now I'm good.
and now you're good, cleansed
Yep.
of it all. We also talked a little bit about how that big release can look like anger. And I think for a lot of first responders, it shows up like anger, um, agitation, impatience, very low frustration tolerance, whatever you want to call it. Um,
That's me.
Yeah, there you go. So we've got all the flavors here. And then what's interesting is kind of then like on the tail end of whatever the big release is, maybe once you realize that the big release wasn't all she wrote and you're not actually fine, then there's like a tendency to try and numb, to go to the different things that basically help you just keep carrying these horrific experiences inside in a way that maybe helps you feel them less viscerally. And so, all that to say, it was a fantastic episode with a lot of information and a lot of really heartfelt shares and stories that I think people will relate to. So, definitely, if you haven't caught that yet, go back and listen to that. Um, but but one thing that I know we talked about that we wanted to talk about more, and we're going to start out today, is Chris, you had mentioned that some of your most traumatic experiences from the job came from training, came from the training that you received for some of the units that you worked with. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so could you maybe just reacquaint us with some of the circumstances of how this training really kind of left this really lasting impact on you?
Sure. So when I became a detective, I was being sent to a lot of schools to learn how to be a detective, right? Do good investigations. And it was a very, very popular, very famous school. I went to a homicide school. There was actually two different versions. I went to the regular homicide school and then the sex homicide school. And I think it was particularly during the sex homicide school where we were exposed. Basically, it was a solid week of just being exposed to case file after case file after case file, and viewing the photographs, and in some cases, actual videos of people dying. And it was just, in fact, one guy behind me, he ended up like having such a visceral reaction, like his blood sugar dropped and he ended up passing out, and they had to bring an ambulance to take him out. And it was like, we all joked about it, but I remember after 5 days of watching and seeing, just being surrounded by death, right? Just, and not just death, but horrific scenes, just shocking scenes. And I think their philosophy was, we want to expose this to you, so when you do go on a call like that, you're prepared. You're not going to break down, right? But I remember the school was in Detroit, so it was about a 2-hour drive home, and there was 4 of us from my department that went. And on the way back, the car was silent. Like, none of us were talking. I think it was literally just trauma overload. And I remember I wasn't driving, but just like looking out the window, watching passing people, and all I could think of was, that's a predator, that's a victim. That, like, it came down to, I was living in a world with just pure evil and victims. And I remember getting home, and I walked into my house, and I'm just kind of standing there, still processing all of this that I've just been exposed to over the course of a week. And I was standing in the kitchen, and I look and I see like a consumer guy coming up with his little consumer vest to read like the meter on the house, right? A totally normal thing. But all of a sudden I'm like, okay, no, you're not taking me out. You're not tricking me. Like, I felt like I was living in a world where people were constantly being murdered, right? And I was going to be next. It was such just too much, right? And then I went to cases of schools to investigate child abuse and child trauma, and I was exposed to case file after case file of just children, and images of dead kids and murdered kids and kids who were starved to death. And it was just like, I don't think people are supposed to see these things, right? And going into this job, we're going to see the worst of the worst, and we're going to be exposed to a lot of horrific things. But it was too much and too fast in such a short period of time. And there was no downtime to really process what you were seeing. And nobody was talking about it. Nobody was talking about the fact that we're seeing horrible things, right? And so what I found later is, and I went back and I was doing my job and I was just fine. But we talked about in the last series when I realized that something was wrong, and I started having these intrusive thoughts come into my head, or these images coming into my head. Some of them were files I had worked, cases I had actually worked, but some of them were just case studies that I had been exposed to. But now I'm seeing these images with my son as the victim, right? And it was just horrifying. And so, yeah, when I eventually went to get therapy, it wasn't just the actual cases I worked that caused me trauma. And I mean, there's been a lot of bad cases that have stuck with me. Some of it, not all of it, but some of it was the training I'd been exposed to, and the real case files I'd been exposed to, and like I said, videos of actual, women being murdered. Knowing that this isn't TV, right? This isn't, yeah. And I think it's so much different than going to an actual scene after the fact, right? We go to the scene, we process it, we, catalog it, but watching, basically snuff films. And it's like, this was real. And I don't know. I still question the philosophy behind having to go through these things to be good at your job, Yeah.
I have so many questions, but I want to pause first and see if Nick, if you have anything that you want to.
No, I mean, I feel you on the training part, because I've had just one training that sticks out to me. Definitely not as horrific as what you had to go through with all of the schooling, because again, that repetition, right? But I'm gonna guess, just gonna throw it out there, that they didn't have a peer support or a counselor on site when you were going through these trainings.
No.
Right. Yeah.
And this was probably 20 years ago, but still,
No, but it just seems, I know that the goal is to plan us for the worst of the worst, right? Like, you're going to see the worst of the worst, but I really don't think you can continue to come up with the worst of the worst, because it continues to get worse and worse. And I think that if we allow us to maybe like process as we go, like, I don't know, again, I don't have any training. Katie's going to take this on in a hot second. But like when you walk into a scene and you start cataloging and start going through that, you are processing that as you're going through it, right? But
Right.
seeing it in training and not being able to like do those points of the job per se kind of takes that part away from you, right?
Right.
Because that part's already been done. So I feel like it's just redundant almost, right?
Very. Yeah.
In a way, because you know what you have to do when you walk into these scenes. You
Hmm.
know what you have to do when the incident happens. Um, and I think it almost takes away a little bit of that processing power that you get as you're going through the incident in the scene
Yeah.
because it's already been lived out. I don't know.
Yeah. No. Yeah. There was, in fact, one of the case studies they did talked about was actually in the hotel we were staying in,
Oh yeah,
right?
confident.
And, yeah, and so I remember going back, and it was a lot of the case studies were like blitz attacks on the victims, like they didn't see it
Mhm.
coming, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
in this particular one, it was like she was going to her room, and this dude blitz attacked from behind, shoved her into the room, and then proceeded to do horrific things to her. And so even on break, going back to my hotel room, I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. Like, I'm just waiting
Yeah.
for the blitz attack to happen. Because yeah, like you said, it was more like living, I don't know, living them out and not, and they did in the case studies, they did talk about, how they investigated it and how they
Right.
found the perpetrator
Yeah.
and held the person accountable. But it was just, yeah, it was just overload.
Yeah.
It was trauma overload for
Yeah.
sure. I
So
think the closest thing I could relate it to maybe for you know civilians who don't have training in law enforcement, first responding kind of thing is think back to for I'm aging myself, but for those of us that were alive and remember 9/11,
mhm.
watching the news clips right as it's happening and like seeing the people jumping from the building and hearing them hitting and knowing what that is
Right.
and and just watching it in the moment as it's happening and being like, oh my God, how awful is that they'd rather jump from the building than stay there where they are.
Yeah. But then do that for 8 hours a day for
5 days
days
a
a
week.
week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And go back and do it the next week. Right.
Yeah. It was very yeah, like I said, we were all just silent. We couldn't even talk on the way home.
Yeah.
Right. The complexity, I appreciate the example, but I think even that complex, it's like I first and foremost hope that this school and the schools around the country that do this have become more trauma informed and that they do offer support resources to those going through the training. Because you were saying, Chris, how like the assumption, right, is that they expose you to these things in part to teach you how to do the job, right? Because clearly they're going through the process of solving such crimes,
Right.
which is the point of the school. But it sounds like you also feel like the assumption on their end is that just ongoing consistent exposure is going to habituate you to the horrific things and leave you less affected by them. Is that what you like what you sensed the approach
Yeah.
was?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like we know and we know more now than we
We
did 20
do.
years ago for sure
Yeah. I think,
about the impacts of trauma.
yeah. I think the thought of PTSD amongst first responders was less common or less, we associate it more with like soldiers going to war, right? But, um, we're not. In fact, when I was diagnosed, that was my first reaction. I thought was, well, I haven't shot anybody. Like, what do you mean? I can't have PTSD. I haven't shot anybody, I'm just a normal detective doing normal detective work,
Oh yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah.
and I had a client just this week sit in front of me and say, I wasn't beaten. I wasn't this, I wasn't that, listing all the possible physical types of harms that one can endure. right?
Yeah.
My lived experience is it just can't be that bad because it's not that, and
Right.
so it's still so ingrained in us to define trauma insufficiently,
Mhm.
right? Is to look at purely physical harm as equating to trauma. And a lot of that again has to do with the lack of understanding of what trauma really is and how human beings experience trauma. And, we now understand that trauma is something that happens inside of us. And it's less dependent on the actual act of what happens outside of us.
Yeah.
But it's the thing that happens inside of us in response to our environment, our experience, the situation.
Yeah.
And one thing that I was thinking about when you were talking was, in hindsight, now knowing what you know, what what do you think having a peer support specialist on site, having a therapist on site and available, and maybe consider it from both the place of considering the stigma, but also like outside of the stigma of utilizing those resources. What do you think that could have done for you?
Oh, I think it would have been tremendous. I think if they could structure the training a little bit different, you know what I mean? So that it wasn't, in fact, the case I worked where, I was going home and there was people at my house and I was like, get rid of them. I found out later I had done that investigation completely wrong because I literally spent 5 days, 8 hours a day cataloging this video evidence of does this involve a child? Does this not? And, later I found out when I went to another school about vicarious trauma was that, you need to take breaks often and walk away, get some fresh air, go outside, but I was just like, no, I'm going to get this done. And I literally, overexposed myself.
Which I think would probably be the most common approach that a first responder would take to this task, right? I mean, you guys aren't
focus, right? Like
yeah.
we have a task in front of us. We're going to fix it. And we are going to hyper focus on that until it is complete.
Yes.
Like,
right.
And I mean, there's a Titanic Lego sitting outside right now. I'm on bag 2's done, right? But like, it's honestly like, again, it's that hyper focus to wanting to complete that task, wanting to do those things. I think as first responders, I mean, the first thing is fix it. How do I fix it?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
right.
I feel, right, that to fix it, I've got to get this case, I've got to get this cataloged, I've got to get this done in order to get to that next step.
Right.
And it's
right.
that
well, you could bring justice to the victim.
Take breaks.
No.
Right? I can't do that. Like that is an insane process thought. Like, no, but it really does like open that up, but like to take that breath and like, step away. Yeah.
Going back, I think, at least at that point, 20 years ago, I think you would have those support people sitting there now and nobody would be talking to them because there's also this stigma that, I can do this. I don't need anybody. This isn't bothering me. I don't need anybody to help. Like, and if I do go there, what are people going to think?
Yeah.
If they see me going and talking to a peer support or, that I'm struggling with this and this is bothering me, then they're going to think I'm not up for the job. Right.
Yeah.
So you can't show I think it would be perceived as a weakness and you can't, especially as a woman in the field, you can't show any kind of weakness,
right. Yeah. The stigma matters. And that's why I kind of framed it that way. Because even today, I think that would be probably a significant amount of people coming out, right, of the training and just not even giving them a glance, not even giving the support people a glance.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think that in that case, then do you think that it would be helpful to incorporate, like, not just structure the training differently, but like incorporate some kind of like mandated or not mandated because like, ugh, what an icky word. I know you guys hate that word, but like
that word.
Make it a part of the training
yeah. Yeah.
that there be like a process session after every whatever day, or
Yeah.
have, there be some kind of different, I mean, there are a multitude of therapeutic ways, and now I'm getting off on a tangent, so I'll bring myself back. But there are multiple ways that we could incorporate therapeutic processing into a training like this that doesn't require talking about your feelings.
Yeah. I think that would be helpful. And even maybe a piece of educating the us that how this stuff can affect you,
Yeah.
How it
right?
will. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
almost frame it that way, is like just like there will be some habituation to coming onto scenes and going through, you guys were mentioning before, right? Like the how it's different when you show up on a scene and you're doing your portion of the big picture,
Right.
right? So you're working on a piece of the bigger puzzle, right? That's a fundamental difference, because
Right.
again, that helps with compartmentalization. Even if your piece of the puzzle is being with the most maybe traumatic scene, when we're able to like chunk it up like that, it becomes more manageable
Hmm.
to process. Our brain is not good at differentiating between what is happening in real time to us and what is something that we are watching happening. And so the traumatic content, if you will, kind of gets digested the same.
Hmm.
And that's another reason why I think it probably is a different experience than going on scene and doing your job in real time. You're also, like Nick said, you're focusing on the task in front of you. You're focused on something. Going through a task doesn't it helps us kind of like get space from our emotional experiences. All of that to say that that's why it's so important to understand that while vicarious trauma is technically different than lived trauma of it happening to us, it impacts us the same way. The symptoms and signs are the same for vicarious trauma as they are for PTSI.
My brain is now the least favorite organ, right? Like
It's complicated. We
it's
have
a
a complicated
complicated one.
relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, it's complicated. It's fascinating how it works and does these things that it does. I feel like there's lots of steps into, I mean, for me, right? I think on that medical side of things, right? Like, oh, this is what's broken. This is how we fix this. This is what
Right.
you've got to take with the brain. There's so many things that need to be done in order for the healing to start happening.
And there's so much that we still don't understand about the brain
Right. Yeah.
and why it works the way that it does. And I think that can sometimes be a frustrating part of the healing process for people, is that there isn't a really clear linear process to,
Yeah.
okay, so we got a brain wound,
Let's
right?
put a cast on it and do some, physical therapy and we'll be fine. Yeah.
Right, right.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
just ain't that simple. We wish it
No.
was.
And I think, unfortunately, too, I think there's much more of a stigma.
So much more.
We talked about that. Like I was when I was diagnosed, I was like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Like everybody else is handling this stuff. What's wrong with me? Why am I not strong enough?
Yeah.
And I really beat myself up on it. And it was finally when my therapist was like, you gotta look at it as the same as your coworker that has that back injury or that, blown out shoulder, like the knee injury. It's the same. It's the same.
Yeah.
But it's so hard also, 'cause I think we culturally, I think we throw around the word stigma easily these days, but don't always really grasp the invasiveness, like just how impactful stigma is. The fact that stigma causes us to turn on ourselves, just like you were sharing, Chris, about how like the first instinct is to feel shame usually about what's wrong with us. There's something wrong with me that I can't, right? And what's interesting is that when we get some distance, we can look back and say, wait a minute, we were expecting to cope with that just fine.
Yeah.
You know, when we get some insight and we get some healing and we can say like, that's ridiculous to expect anyone to sit there for however many hours of however many days and watch, you know, violent after violent after violent after violent film, essentially, of a real thing, of a real violent thing happening, and to not be impacted by that. That's nonsense. Hogwash. There's also a very real element, and this is like what I think feeds stigma is the okay, I'm gonna skip over this word because I'm not gonna be able to say it.
You're
Ostracism.
being ostracized.
Yes. I can say it for the record. My brain isn't functioning today.
Not today.
Oh, not today.
Today.
But that's a real thing, right? And so it perpetuates the conditioning of turning on ourselves because the reality is, just like you said, if there had been people there to support you, probably no one would have utilized them. And not because they didn't want it or need it, but because the community that you operate in says, if you need help, there's something wrong with you and you can't be trusted. You are a weak one, and we're only as strong as our weakest link. So, you know, you're a problem now.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
disconnection and the isolation and, you know, the potential abuses that can come from being othered in these communities like this. I mean, it's very real.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we still hear check your feelings at the door, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There are no feelings in here.
Yeah. And the fact that, you know, we spent 2 hours on the way home not talking about it.
Right.
Not even not talking about it, but just not talking, which tells me that they were affected too, because on the way there we were all joking and laughing and, you know, we get along very well, but on the way back it was silence for 2 hours.
Yeah.
But not did we not just talk about, but we just, you know, what's wrong with us that we didn't be like, man, that was really fucked up. Like, can you believe it? Yeah. We just sat there in silence.
And nothing was wrong, right?
Right. Right.
We didn't know. You didn't know. We weren't taught how to handle these situations. We weren't taught that maybe being like, dude, what was that? Right?
Right.
What opened up a conversation because again, we're not allowed to have those feelings.
Right.
Right. I think I mentioned it. I cried on a scene once. And it was pretty bad. And like, I'm starting to cry and everybody looked at me and they're like, oh, feelings. And like, where were they going to go? And they were not stopping no matter what I tried to do. Those tears were coming out as I held that woman's hand.
Mm-hmm.
Right. No matter what I did, I could not stop them. But everybody else's reaction was to walk away because I'm having feelings on the middle of a highway. Like, so
Can't do that.
Can't do that. Right. So and we weren't taught that. We weren't given the opportunity to learn how to process those things. So, and we will continuously say, man, what was wrong with me? And the problem is, I'm going to say it, it's what's wrong with the system.
100%.
Right? It's not us.
Mm-hmm.
It's what's wrong with the system and the education of tools and the toolbox and the processes and the things that have been given to us now that are coming to light and coming along the way.
So when we factor in like the chronic suffering that comes with, you know, you guys get into this job for whatever your personal reasons are, this career, and you're like thrown in like a washing machine of sorts, metaphorically speaking, spitting you out, you know, pressed and, you know, tucked and presentable, like little machines,
That's why we wear a uniform.
right?
Right.
And then off you are to then tackle being a human being in circumstances where you're expected to be not. And I'm curious how you've experienced that by way of your relationships. How has how has the experience of what you've been conditioned to do and be and feel impacted your personal life?
I got a simple one that I can go with first, like my lack of empathy on certain things, right? So, like if it's a little cut or a cold or something like that, I'm like, just get over it, right? And really, like again, like this week, my wife's been sick. My son just now got sick, and um, this week I took it a little differently, right? I would say that over the last year, I mean, therapy has definitely helped me kind of learn that empathy it can keep coming. It doesn't actually go away, right? It's there. More empathetic to those things, right? But like that little thing, right? It clashes there because when I go on these calls and I'm like, put a band-aid on it. Let's go, right? Like let's do these things. So when I come home and I'm like, put a band-aid on it. Let's go, right? Like so I think that clashes when they just want like, can you just make me a cup of tea, or can you sit with me, or can you give me a hug? Can you be human, right? And not this person that's just like fix problem, take problem to hospital, right? Like,
Mhm. On to the
the,
next problem.
yeah, on to the next problem, right? Um, I think that's one of the, and I call it minor, right? But it's one of those clashes we've had at home, and I don't talk about calls anymore, right? Because again, I don't want to burden with the calls or things like that. So it's just like, I had a bad call. I'm not going to talk about it until she sees the news and she's like, "Is that you?" And I'm like, "Yes, that's me." Right. So those are the little clashes we get into. And again, I've been very blessed in my relationship. And if it wasn't for Stephanie, I wouldn't be where I am today, for sure. With her understanding, with her compassion, with her empathy. Um, and when she watches this, hopefully she does, she'll hear this part because, I'm going to say that out loud. um, but I've been very blessed in that we honestly, we don't have like knockout fights, right? Like we're not screaming at each other. We don't do those things. I think part of my trauma from my past, right? I do not like it because of what happened when I was younger and things like that, that I will not go into that zone. Um, Anger is my most avoided emotion, right? And I know it's a secondary emotion, but it's my most avoided emotion just because of what I have seen that it can do. So I tend to stay away from it. But my lack of empathy definitely pulls in on the struggle and the impact on those relationships. Yeah.
I think for me, it was initially when I was going through before I realized what was happening to me, and I was having all of these images and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to trust. I didn't know who to talk to. So it definitely impacted my my marriage, and that I put a wall up, and I just didn't know. And maybe if I'd gotten help sooner, um, that would have saved our marriage. I don't know. She was also going through her own in physical injuries from the job, and I was having mental, damage from the job. But I think I've been blessed in that, after therapy and after understanding better what was happening to me, and also having the fortune that I did at KDPS, and that I could, I could stop being a detective, and I went back to being a firefighter. And I talked with my therapist a lot about that. I'm like, I'm still going to be seeing trauma. And she's like, yeah, but your job is going to be to go in and fix it. And then you're in and you're out. Right. And I'm not married to this case from beginning all the way through trial as a detective. Right. So it was like my emotional involvement would be much less, and I would be having that specific task. So I was fortunate enough that I could change careers within my career, and I've done that several times. I after the divorce, I went back to being a B cop, and but I remained very intentional in hanging on to that love of humanity, right, and everything that I did, and so, but that was a very intentional act, because I've seen a lot of cops after 25 years, they hate people. they want to retire and go to Montana and not ever be around people again. You know what I mean? Because you get so cynical and you're like, oh, you know, are you kidding? You're crying over that. But
Yep.
I've been very intentional in embracing my empathy and, again, my love for humanity when I worked with the homeless population. And where I'm going to bring this back to how has that affected my home life? I think it was very important for me with my son growing up that I've been very honest with him about what I do, about the things I've seen, almost not overexposure and over traumatizing him, but also not doing the opposite where it's like, you know what, we don't talk about what mommy does, you know. And in fact, one of the last calls I went in as a detective, we were at the mall. I was waiting to get his picture with the Easter Bunny, and I got a call that a 4-year-old was dead. He was 4 at the time. And anyway, later that night, he caught me crying in the closet, and you know, and so I told him, I didn't go into obviously details, but I'm like, you know, mommy, you know, sometimes bad things happen to kids, and you know, I had to go in and work a case with you know, a child your age, and it's hard. And so I've been very and those conversations have evolved as he's grown. He's 14 now, and so, you know, but yeah, we've talked about the job and the effects it's had on me, and over the years, and the PTSD, and so I think that it's been very. We have a very good relationship, you know, and that I'm incredibly authentic with him, right? And so I think a lot of that is because of having experienced the trauma that I have and gotten the help to deal with it and to be able to talk about my feelings. And so, and not wanting to shut down and shut him out like I did my ex-wife, you know what I mean? So I think that's really helped strengthen our relationship, but it's an intentional, every day it's intentional. And I have to continue when I see myself starting to have, you know, triggers, I guess, you know, now that I know what to look for, then I go get help right away. I don't wait until the Coke bottle is, you know, exploding, which is what I had done before.
Yeah, I will say the kids definitely changed the way that I handle things too, right? And like, I love your word of just intentional with the things, because I'm very similar in, again, obviously they don't get all the details, but yeah, mama had a bad call. She's going to be off for a little couple days, right? Or something like that. So like, they're 7, so sometimes they can just tell now, right? They'll be like, "Mama, you have a bad call." I'll be like, "Yeah, mama had a bad call." Make you sad or angry? Made mama sad. And I'm like, okay, right? Like those conversations kind of, they get it. And I think that has also changed, right? Because my son has anxiety. So to help him walk through his anxiety, like be like with him, like, how do we breathe? Right? Let's breathe together, right?
Yeah.
These things like have definitely been a positive impact almost.
It
Right?
has. And helping him label his feelings, you know, because so many people grow up and they don't know, like, what are you feeling? I don't, you know, and so we would have very intentional conversations, whether he was upset or what was going on. Like, let's label that, you know, and that's okay. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to be sad. It's okay.
Yeah. I mean, we say that too. Yeah. It's okay. It's okay to have those feelings. It's how we navigate it afterwards, right? Like, so we can be angry at somebody, but it's not okay to punch them in the face. Right. We can be angry and we can scream, right? We can be like, do those things. So like I am with you on that, like that. And I think that has been a positive kind of thing from what has come from.
Yeah.
From this. Because that was never done for me.
Right.
Right. Never. Right.
No.
And then in work, even more, don't do that. Right.
Yeah. Right. Don't talk about your feelings. So I try to normalize it for him. So as he's growing up and going into whatever profession, it's not a negative thing.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But these are new concepts, you know, both societally and within your professions, right? These are not things that you both speak about, kind of coming even from the prior generation, where having to navigate that much more expectation and stigma around, we don't talk about feelings, and then like feelings are bad. Right. Like, don't feel these things. and definitely don't express them. If you're going to feel them, hold them in and pretend like you don't have them. But
Exactly.
there's a couple of things that I picked up on with your both of you guys kind of sharing in that regard, and that was so like the first thing that I want to point out is this concept that Nick you were talking about between the role of problem solver versus like comfort giver.
Yeah, they're two different things.
Oh, of course. Yeah, they're totally different things. And how to navigate that when you are looked at as, or maybe, when you are, let's say you're on a call, Nick, right? It's like you're dealing with someone potentially on the one of the worst days of their lives.
Mhm.
As we all know, again, going back to our humanity, we know that like when we're having a really bad day, we want and need comfort and compassion. We go back to kind of some of those visceral things that we needed as a child. And you might be looked at often to provide that.
So I am on a multitude of levels, right? One for the patient, because when I come in as the EMS lieutenant, I am the more senior person,
Okay.
right? So me coming in, I go on all the critical calls. I do when the paramedics need help, I'm the one that gets called in. So when I'm coming in as the figure. And they often say to me, especially my paramedics, are like, I need an adult, so thanks, mom. Right. So so it's almost constant that that's what I'm doing, right? And with the patients, when they see me come in and then people are looking to me for the answers, now I'm their answer, right? So now I'm the one that's comforting them. And yes, what
Right.
you said, yes.
But
Yeah.
the toll that it takes, these are things that take different tolls. Like when
Mhm.
when when we're in problem solver mode, right? When we're in fix it mode,
Yeah.
it it's less draining a lot of the time than when we are in either or both roles,
Right.
but especially when we're in comfort, right? Comfort giver role,
Right.
that's a lot more emotionally draining. That's a lot more taxing on our system to just be patient and present. Because that means that our humanity has to bump up against their humanity.
Mhm.
And maybe we're fucking tired, right? Like, oh, you're probably fucking tired and
Yeah.
exhausted and
I
sleep
just want to take
deprived.
back.
Right. And
Yeah.
when we're in that state, we have less access to our empathy. I think you said it beautifully that like, yeah, we we don't lose our empathy, but I think our empathy waxes and wanes depending on how much our capacity, to sustain ourselves is fulfilled. But I want to come then over to kind of something that you were talking about, Chris, which is like the act of intentional effort to kind of counteract or counterbalance the almost like dissociative autopilot nature that you guys can get into when you're in problem solver mode, when you're doing the job. Part of that conditioning is almost, you know, leaving your feelings at the door, whatever that means. Usually that internally, that's like a dissociative practice effort of I'm not here to be feely, mushy, nicey, comforty, right? I'm here to fix the problem and then go. So I can fix the next problem and the next problem because that's like my job.
Yeah.
And your job is still going to be there regardless of how much effort you put in to comforting someone, right? So it's not like if you get to stay there and be the comfort person while the team goes on to the next call. No, you still have to go and keep going. And so like this effort of intentionality, I think is so, 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 so important.
Yeah. And I don't want to be that disgruntled coworker. You know what I mean? I don't want to be that disgruntled cop that hates people. Because most of us got into this profession because, we want to help and we want to make a difference. I do think the unique thing though with public safety, because we do wear the three hats, we're the police and we're the firefighters and we're the medical first responders. And I do think I've seen, over the last 26 years, things, you talked about the machine and we all come out and we're all the same. And I have seen over the last 2 decades, things relaxing a bit as far as like even our uniform standards. It used to have to be, we all had to be, and now we can wear, we might have a couple of different options. So we're not all, it's not so important that we're all uniformed and the same. There's been a relaxing of the tattoo policies and all these things that I guess kind of humanize us a little bit more as we take those roles and are responding to people in their worst. And it's almost become more, we do comfort them, because even though we can't stay there, but, when you're handling people in their worst, you do want to try to comfort them as much as you can. And so, there is a shift, and I've been able to not have to be so robotic in my calls, every day. And I've worked on developing relationships with the community members that I'm constantly dealing with, whether it's business owners or the frequent flyers that we run on calls every day, day in and day out. And so I think that's helped too a little bit. I see that in some of my coworkers too. They also call me mom, a lot of them. So maybe they're looking to me to see how I act, or react. And then they're doing the same.
It does sound like from both of you, there is a sensed expectation that as senior women in your fields, there is an understood expectation, maybe both from yourselves and your community, but you can speak to that more of like, of this like paternal or not paternal, maternal energy that you're gonna know how to solve the problem and comfort people. And I'm wondering if that feels, I know, Chris, you were talking about like the intentionality behind it and kind of where you're at, being able to balance it, and that can be a very fulfilling practice of your humanity, of kind of playing out your humanity and helping you stay connected to your humanness. But I'm wondering, what your perspectives are on like the sense of it. Does that feel like a burden at times? What's your take?
I don't know that I think for me, personally, it's just been, in the last 5 years, I've just really committed to being authentic, right? Being my authentic self. At that conference, they said our authenticity is our superpower, right? And so it's just me reaching a point in my career, in myself, where I'm confident enough this is who I am, this is how I work, and I'm going to solve the problem, but I'm going to do it compassionately. And so for me, it's just been a natural progression into being more confident in living authentically, working authentically.
Okay.
Yeah. First of all, I'm still looking for the adult behind me because I don't know when it happened, right? Like, all of a sudden, it was like, oh, you're the grown up in the room. But I think it was a natural kind of step. I think it is. At work, I am me. I am nothing less, nothing more. I constantly say at work, you get enough of me, right? And this is the me that you get. And while people want me to like promote and do things and make those next steps and go up, I'm like, this is where I need to be, right? With the people, comforting them, making them better paramedics and making them go to that next step themselves, right? I think we need those people in those areas. And again, I don't know how it happened. I don't know when it happened, but there is always people in my room, in my office. They are always asking me questions. They are always saying, "What would you do?" My phone keeps texting. I have 3 text messages on here right now, and I'm off work asking me about how to fix a problem at work. So I think it just comes with being confident, right? And I don't think we get that confidence in our job when we first start.
No.
I always say to my paramedics, I'm like, it's 3 to 5 years, right? All of a sudden, there's going to be one call that you run and you don't question anything that you did. right? You don't look in that protocol book. You don't question anything. You know everything you did was right. And that's the moment you can call yourself a paramedic, right? Until then, we all know our butt cheeks are tight. We are like so scared and we don't know what we're going to do. And there becomes a confidence that comes with that, with time, with becoming better, with training yourself more. And I think opening myself up on my healing journey, right, and talking about it and not being scared of it and not hiding that I go through what I go through has also opened up that channel for people to, yeah.
Yes, I teach out at the police academy, and I actually put in my introduction about myself where I'm talking about me and what I've done. I put in that I was diagnosed with PTSD, and that I talk about how I was ashamed of it initially, but it's nothing to be ashamed of, and it's going. The things we see are going to affect us, and so normalize it and letting the new kids know it's okay, and it's okay to get help, and that's what you need to do when you feel that happening.
Yeah. Breaking the stigma. So what I wanted to ask was, I want to kind of shift a little bit and talk a little bit more about the process that you both went through, shifting from experiencing that increased suffering and, experiencing those kind of stacking symptoms, getting worse. And then when did you know or start to sense that you needed to do something about it, and like what that was like for you when you were first making the journey toward seeking help? What were the barriers in place that kept you from seeking help sooner? Like, just what was that experience like?
Well, for me, I think, I may have talked about this in the first one a little bit, but for me, it was, I was having these images, intrusive images of my son being victimized, being killed in all these different ways. And so I was putting up a wall because I'm seeing awful things of him happening to him. And I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know who to talk to. And it progressed to where I was doing things to him. And that really shook me to my core. And I didn't know what it meant. And I didn't know who to talk to. And I was afraid if I talked to somebody, like, they'd report me to CPS, and like, am I going to lose my kid? And, knowing I'm not going to do anything to him, but like, what does this mean? And I think where I knew I needed to get help. I finally broke down and called my therapist. I literally was like, I felt like I was living in just doom and that my kid's going to die. I don't know when. And I remember driving home just thinking my kid's going to die. And I was bawling and like, I couldn't, I was living in a constant state of panic and fear and terror. And I finally called my therapist crying. I'm like, I think it's time to come in, because I've had the same therapist for years, but we might go years in that talk. It's more of a, when something's going on in my life. And so she got me in. But even going the first few times, and this is a therapist I've worked with through a lot of things, I was lying to her, right? And she was trying to do that. She diagnosed me with PTSD, but I wasn't sharing the fact that I was having thoughts of doing things to my son. And so I was lying about when we were trying to do the EMDR. I'm not telling her what I'm really thinking, right? And so I'm like, I'm keeping up this charade, and so clearly nothing's getting better. And I finally broke down, and I was like, we have to stop. And I'm bawling, and I finally tell her, and she's like, and I told her, like, she's like, why didn't you tell me sooner? I'm like, I didn't know if you're like Amanda, you're going to have to report me, even though nothing's happened. It was a horrifying thing to come out and actually admit I'm having thoughts of harming my child. Like, that sounds like a monster, right? And so I couldn't, it's even still hard to admit or talk about, but that's what was and she explained it, and we've worked through it now. And she's like, no, that's like when people stand on top of the Grand Canyon and they have thoughts of throwing themselves overboard, you're not going to do it. It's your brain's way of like showing you the worst possible thing that you can imagine. So then you can, I don't know, but she explained it in a much better way. But yeah, so once I finally came clean and admitted what was actually happening, then we were able to make some breakthroughs with therapy. And we're always going to have every now and then. I don't have hardly ever have intrusive images, but every now and then, one might pop in. But it's the power's gone, the power behind it, and it's just like, oh, okay, well, there it is. It'll go away. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. The curtain has been drawn, and
yep,
the Wizard of Oz is,
yep.
just no longer the big bad thing.
Yeah. And so, I'm always going to have, we don't ever unsee anything, but working through therapy, they've been categorized a little bit better. They're not just floating around in my brain. And again, like I said, the power has been taken away, that it doesn't shock me to my core.
So you've done talk therapy and EMDR. Those are
Yeah.
the primary methods of healing that you've used and that have been helpful for you.
Yes.
Okay. Nick?
Mine started a few months after I had the kids. Again, hormones, I'm guessing, right? And we went through a lot to have them, a lot of IVF, a lot of hormonal therapy, a lot of those things. It actually took us over 7 years to have them. So the diagnosis came as postpartum depression, right? So I got put on meds, right? And it was like, okay, well, this numbs me, so this is great, right? So it was numbing, and it was, I learned that Zoloft was not for me, right? In this process, it is not a great antidepressant for me, but that was it. Like, but it was safe for breastfeeding, so that's why I was nursing at the time. And it was actually like I had Kensington in my hands at one point, and we were on the bed, and I just was like, and I had to get up and walk away, right? And I have twins, if you don't know. So Kevin was being fine, Kenzie was being a little much. And at that point, that's when Steph said, "You need to go see the doctor," right? And I don't know if it's postpartum depression or what it is, but you need to go see the doctor because that agitation and that it had overflowed, right? Frustration was just overflowing from me. Again, went to see the doctor, got him put on meds, got numb, was doing great. I was working wonderfully. Everything was just, yeah. And then I didn't know it was my trigger call, but my trigger call is I had a police officer that was shot. And I think I've talked about this before. And another call came out with police officer shot, suspect is shot, and I'm heading up the road. And I think my watch said my heart rate was like 160, like off the bat. And I could, even now, right, I still feel that feeling, right? Talking about it. But for 3 days, my heart rate remained at 160, right? Like just that feeling of doom, right? That feeling of pressure, like palpitations in my chest all the time. It just was like, what is going to happen next? What is going to happen next? And it just kept going. Nightmares kept coming back, right? Intrusive thoughts increased, and it was really bad. And I called a friend that I know had started therapy, and he does it through the Center of Excellence, which is sponsored by the IAFF. And I was like, "What's that phone number?" He was like, "I'll text it to you." I said, "Okay." So he texted it to me. And I wrote it down on a piece of paper, and I deleted the text from my phone because I can't have the evidence in my phone, right? And I sat on that number for about a week, just like looking at it. It was in my pocket all the time, being like, I should call. I should call.
Nick, what did you feel like was the biggest barrier or one of the biggest barriers for making that call?
I didn't want to be weak, right? And this comes from childhood trauma, is what we've learned, right? Because you learn a lot. Because like even now, I have a parent that says, I can't do therapy. Therapy's weak, right? People that take medication, that's weak, right? You just got to be strong. You've just got to do this. You've just got to get through life. To the point that one of my brothers actually says, well, I don't know if we had trauma or if we just had life, right? And I'm like, it's both of those things, right? Um, but I think that was what my hesitation was, to not be, I was already the odd sheep in the family, right? To then add me getting therapy and adding another, you know, less than, put that in quotation marks, mark on my little tally going on. I
Another
feel like
reason to other you.
other me, right? I think that was the big barrier in things.
Makes sense.
Um, but I finally called. They were like, "We're really busy right now. We'll get you a therapist as soon as we can." Um, and I got super lucky with my first therapist. Obviously, like with the first intake questions, right? I'm like, yes, no, I'm not answering that. Like, so to now like 3 years in therapy, right? Like I can talk to her about anything. Um, so I still do take medication. For daily. I take medication for nightmares because I still have nightmares that come in and go. And I take anxiety medication too. So now I'm up to 3 medications. But I do a talk therapy, EMDR are kind of the things that I do. Um, and then I think, honestly, um, Katie, you might know it, not know it, but you've come in as a huge help on this, like being able to talk about it on these things, right? And the conferences and expanding Responders for Pride on this front and being able to talk about the experiences and talk about where we've come, where we've gone, what we're doing with our journey in mental health. And has really been a therapy in itself also.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I think in the time that I've been in the mental health field, I've learned both how complex human beings are,
Mhm.
and I kind of take away one slight simplification, which is that we all grapple with a world inside of us and the world outside of us. And when we're able to, I think, connect with ourselves authentically, and when we are able to find connection external to us, those are like two of the most important things that wind up leading to whatever you want to call it. You can call it healing or you can call it well-being. But as humans, we like to overcomplicate everything. And we are complicated, but it makes so much sense to me that being a part of RfP and having these bigger connections
Mhm.
to um, to the humanity of the world that you work in and the world that we live in is um, I can see how that would be helpful.
Yeah. So thank you.
I mean, you started it, girl.
Yeah.
I think you, you know, I've been really grateful to be a part of this process and get to talk to you guys and our other guests and the people that we meet because I am definitely from a background where I had no experience before I met my wife with military or paramilitary type careers. And it's been an interesting journey, but one of the biggest takeaways has been how much there is this effort to break down the first responders' humanness and associate it with weakness, but then build back up something that is unsustainable because you're still human. And the pressure from society and from yourselves that I can only imagine at times is unbearable because you are expected to be perfect. You're expected to be perfect, i.e., non-human. all the while juggling your humanity inside. And so I deeply, deeply thank you both for the stories that you've shared in our 2 episodes. I mean, we could have hours and hours of conversation. We have, and I'm hopeful we will continue to have those conversations together and with the community. I think I just have one more question
Yeah.
for you both before we wrap up for this episode. I'm curious, you guys have already kind of hinted throughout our conversation around some of the changes that you've noticed happening. You know, Chris, you were mentioning like the relaxing of the conformity of it all that at least helps you reconnect more with your sense of humanity, right? When you don't have to act and see yourself as, you know, kind of a faceless, nameless cog in a machine, there's more space for you to be you and to bring that into the work that you do. Nick, you in and of itself, like you are part of the process, right? You're, you know, of your department evolving and you being in the role that you are and helping those that you do in breaking stigma and just like you said, you know, nurturing a new generation of EMS professionals to be able to connect to their humanity. But I'm wondering if there's any other specific details around the role that departments can play, that leadership can play, peer support even in creating more of an environment, keep continuing on that process and growing that ability to make more of a safe environment for you guys when you work in this regard.
Yeah, I mean, I think that absolutely, right? I think learning that we are better than when we come through this process, right? Because I am definitely a better person than I was before the process, right? Um, and like Chris said, she's intentional with her humanity, right? That connects to people more, right? When we can leverage that as a strength, right? And not a weakness in this connection, it can be so much more. So I think understanding that when our members and our employees and our people, right, go through these processes, they can be better than they were before, right? They can be connect more, right? They can be a better employee in general, right? When we want to get to that part of it, right? Take away that like people part, but like they're going to be a better person in general. They might not call out as much. They might not need all of like the things that are going. They're going to be better than with their connections and things like that. So I think in reducing that stigma and showing that you are cared for, right? That you are not just a number, right? And that we know on the other side of this and this struggle, we can make it that you can be better than, and that this world truly is better with you in it, being your full, true, authentic self could do so much in getting people the help they need.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think, like I said, I've seen a lot of change over the last 26 years in my department. And the fact that even last year that they created the LGBTQ resource, liaison, was huge. As far as when I first hired on, we talked about, I was in the closet, you didn't know if you were going to get fired or not, to now they actually have a liaison officer. I think I think when we can all be authentic, we're all going to be better at our jobs. And I think if I've seen this ERGs, I guess, being tossed around in corporate worlds, employee resource groups, I think if we could see more, law enforcement, firefighter agencies implementing more of these ERGs, I'd love for them to, we have the LGBTQ liaison. I think they should have a military liaison or a veteran, let's cover all of them, right? And so that everyone feels like they are included and that they have a resource, a group, that they can lean to if, they feel like they need help in whatever area. But just, it doesn't have to just be an LGBTQ thing. You know what I mean? It can be all kinds
Absolutely.
of resource groups. And I think it should be. And then I think that would really help people feel like they can be authentic with who they are.
Yeah. And their struggles, right? They can be
Yeah,
authentic.
absolutely.
And,
Absolutely. I think the more authentic we can feel, the more we can admit that we all have struggles,
yeah.
and
Mhm.
that's not a weakness, that's normal, and that it's okay.
Well, and both of you are living proof of this, right? Both of you have come out, like you say, stronger, more authentic, happier, more capable, both in your personal lives and in your professional lives. And so, what I'm hearing you both say is that the continuation of working to reduce that stigma, have conversations, communicate openly, have open door policies, right? Like, bring in new teams, new blood if needed, that have that built-in understanding that aren't from maybe the old guard that are still holding on to these old antiquated and just unfactual beliefs, and also increasing resources. And so we need to keep reducing the stigma, and we need to keep making it easier to access the help, have it be available and ready, so that when the individual realizes or notices or maybe listens to this podcast and is walking away saying, shit, it's probably time. That process of getting that help isn't difficult, isn't stigmatizing, isn't a barrier, but that is an easy path for access. So that's what I'm hearing. Am I right in
Yeah.
taking away?
Yep. Yep.
Yep.
Well, I couldn't agree more. You know, that's why we're doing what we're doing, right?
Yep.
Um, and like actually in the same vein of that, right? We're having these conversations to reduce the stigma, and we are working as an organization to try and offer resources. In fact, what we're going to do is we're going to link not just our directory. We've been working on a new project for RfP where we're putting together a nationwide directory of providers who we know have experience working with first responders
Yep.
and are queer informed, so that when you guys are able to go into that directory and look up your state, you're able to find someone that will hopefully again make the process easy to get into working with someone and feel like it's a good fit, feel like it's an appropriate fit, and that you can trust that provider to hold the space for you in the way that you need it authentically. So we're going to link that in the description box below. We're also going to link the episode 1 so that you can catch that if you haven't.
Yeah.
And we'll probably throw some additional resources in there as well, some
Yeah.
good hotline resources and easy access resources. But otherwise, I'm wondering, what are your final thoughts from our conversation as a whole around PTSI?
It's normal,
Yeah.
and it's nothing to be ashamed of. And it's probably more common than people realize. One thing my therapist said was, "You think you're the only one in the department that has it? Honey, you're sorely mistaken." And if they're not getting therapy, they're dealing with it in other unhealthier ways. So,
I agree. Like growth can be there, right? Like I know we talk a lot about the injury, and a lot of people will tell their story of how they got that injury or things like that. But um, what you can do after,
mhm.
right? It's what you can do during the process, and it's peaks and valleys, and this is never going to go away,
No.
right? And there are good days, there are bad days, there are months that will go great, and there are months where it's going to feel like you're in the trenches. But through that, you are growing, and on the back end of this, it can be better. right?
And you can have such a greater appreciation for what you have, in this world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some profound changes and shifts that you've both highlighted, you've experienced, and I'm so glad that we're ending on that note of hope, hopefully, that there's work to be done, but that there's also some really beautiful stuff on the other side of that
It
work.
does get better.
Yeah.
It does.
Oh, thank you both. I wish I could give you both a big hug. I hope I see you both soon.
Chris, thank you for being here. Like Katie said, it's been amazing. It's always great talking to you.
I always
We'll
love
come up with another topic to talk about soon, so we could just keep on going with it. So, but thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But that's a wrap on another episode of the RfP podcast, where courage meets community. If you were moved, inspired, or just reminded that you are not alone, share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on Responders for Pride on Instagram and Facebook. We're going to keep this conversation going. So until next time, stay proud, stay safe, and keep showing up for yourself and each other. Bye, everyone.
Bye.